name's Dr. Angela Gayton, and today I'm going to share with you a little bit about me and about my research. I'm a lecturer in Applied Linguistics and Education, and I am the postgraduate convener for the School of Critical Studies. So my background is English language teaching. That's what I did when I first left university. And I've been really lucky to get to teach English in Italy and the Netherlands, Morocco and Tanzania, and even China and Vietnam. So I've always been passionate about language education generally. When I started my master's in applied linguistics, I began to develop my research interests in more detail. As a postgraduate student, what I became really interested in was language learning motivation. So what is it that drives us to learn languages, as well as different aspects of multilingualism? And I developed these interests further as a PhD student. When I started working as a lecturer with a lot of international postgraduate students, I also became fascinated by processes of internationalization of higher education and what sort of questions to do with language that brings up. So my various research interests come together under this big overarching question, namely, what is the role of language within processes of internationalization of higher education? This is the question that I'm trying to answer in different ways with my research, sometimes with a focus on staff and sometimes with a focus on students. One research project that I carried out looked at staff's awareness of language assessment, so high-stakes language testing such as IELTS. I think it's important to acknowledge that all research starts with a big question, so the real-world issue that you're trying to address with your work. In this case, we wanted to find out what aspects of language assessment literacy, specifically in relation to the interpretation and the use of international students' language test scores, would be useful to address in university staff training. In other words, what do staff across the university curriculum need to know about language assessment? To find an answer, we carried out interviews with staff in different roles at a number of UK universities. And what we found was that university lecturers need a greater understanding of language test scores and how students achieve them, and what these scores can and can't tell us about an individual's proficiency. This is important because staff's knowledge and understanding of these issues impacts their teaching practice and how they interact with students. Another project I carried out focused on students' experiences. The big question was whether students can apply what they've learned at university to their language teaching practice once they graduate. We wanted to know whether students of subjects such as applied linguistics and TESOL were able to put into practice what they had learned in one context in their first year working as language teachers in their home country of mainland China. To answer this question, we carried out interviews and diaries with novice language teachers in their first year of work in their home context, so mainland China. And we found that students can struggle a little bit to apply their postgraduate learning in, for example, the UK, to their teaching practice in another context, so in, for example, China. So there's interesting issues of cross-cultural applicability of this learning. So those were just two examples of research projects that I've carried out in recent years. I think what's exciting about my research is that it takes as its starting point the belief that language is fundamental to everything we do in the university space, whether you're a student in English language and linguistics or in biology or in engineering. My research is about exploring ways to raise better awareness about the importance of language issues among staff and among students so that we can improve teaching and learning at university. So these research interests inform my postgraduate teaching. I have two courses that you can see on the slide here, one which is about all things to do with second language acquisition, and the other which focuses on higher education internationalization and the role that language plays. In both of these courses, I encourage students to draw heavily on their own knowledge, experiences, and beliefs relating to language education specifically and education more generally as the starting point. In our diverse classes, we learn from each other through in-depth discussion, justifying our beliefs and even having them challenged, because this is how we learn. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this brief introduction to my research and teaching, and I'm so looking forward to seeing you in Glasgow in September. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to this short presentation in which I will talk about examples of the kind of research that we carry out here at the University of Glasgow and how this influences our teaching. In particular, I'll talk about my own research and how this has informed the teaching I do for one of the courses that I have developed for the MSc in Applied Linguistics. The course is actually open to students doing any postgraduate degree within the English Language and Linguistics area here at the University of Glasgow. If you don't know me already, my name is Dr. Piotr Węgorowski. I'm a lecturer in applied linguistics, and I'm interested in how language can be applied in various different contexts. Because in this talk, I want to focus particularly on the kind of research I do, I thought it'd be useful to start and with an introduction about my research interests. So by training, I'm a linguistic ethnographer, and what that means is that I'm interested in how language and culture interact. And this kind of research often takes a long time. It's very hard to carry out, but it can be very rewarding. I do engage in other types of research as well. And as you'll see example of this today, there are other things that I can look at in terms of the kind of data I gather and the kind of analysis that I engage in. When it comes to my research interests, my primary focus lies in the area of professional and institutional discourse, particularly in relation to legal or paralegal settings. So I'm very much interested in how language functions in those wider institutions or across different professions. But I also have experience of working in multilingual contexts. And in fact, I have previously been involved in a big project looking at multilingual practices of individuals in very diverse societies. So ideally, I'd love to combine both my interests, both the focus on the legal matters and the language in the legal sphere, as well as multilingualism. And this is something I will want to talk to you about today. So the example of research that I would like to share with you very briefly is around the so-called English-only policies in the workplace. This is something that you might have heard of, something that you might have even been subject to, and it's something that definitely exists, but it's not really talked about that much, partly because it's very difficult to research. There is some older research from the US that dates back to the 80s, really, so it's quite old now, and it shows some examples of language discrimination and how employees try to sue their employers on the basis of this. On this slide here, you have an example of the kind of notice that one of the employers put up for their employees. And this was cited as evidence in court. And the notice says, absolutely no guns, knives, or weapons of any kind are allowed on these premises at any time. English is the official language of Premier Operated Services, Inc. All conversations on these premises are to be in English. Other languages may be spoken to customers who cannot speak English. So you can see here that there is a lot going on in this particular notice, and there are particular ideological positions that the employer has taken. And in our class, we would talk about this. We would think about what kind of ideologies there are, why this sign was put up in the first place, what does it really mean? But as I've mentioned, it's not something that we do tend to see officially a lot. What I have done in my own research then is I've started looking at decisions of employment tribunals in the UK where people have complained about language discrimination. From a legal point of view, it's a bit tricky because there is no legal basis on which people can do this, but people nevertheless mention the times where they feel they have been discriminated against. And here is an example on the slide from a judgment that shows an example of this. In this particular example, an individual felt that they were excluded from the workplace interaction because all the co-workers spoke Danish, a language that this person didn't understand. So it made them feel isolated and perhaps intimidated as well. Again, this kind of attitude tells us something about attitude to multilingualism at large. And it's something that we would discuss in more detail in class. So you might ask yourself again, what are the kind of ideologies at display here? Why do people have those feelings? Are these feelings legitimate? Or perhaps it's something that should be easily dismissed? It's something that really serves for a broader discussion, and that's something that we definitely do encourage in our courses. So moving on then to the kind of ways in which we apply our research into teaching, I can already tell you that this example has been taken from my teaching, and again, it's something that we would definitely talk about in a bit more detail in class. But it relates to my both research interests and the two courses I convene. Firstly, I teach forensic linguistics, which looks at the language of the law and legal context, very broadly understood. So we might look at language of police interviews, the language of the courtroom, thinking about language experts. I have recently been involved in a big project looking at digital forensic experts. So I'm thinking about the ways in which I can incorporate some of the findings into the teaching. And on the other hand, I teach a course called multilingualism, which looks at the societal aspects of multilingualism. And in fact, the examples I've shared come from a class on this particular course. I'll also contribute to other types of teaching, particularly around research methods. I teach on some of the core courses on the program. And as an example, I do run a session where I talk about interviews as a data collection method. It's something I have experience of, and it's something that seems very easy until you've actually done it and you realize it's much more complicated than you first thought. So students will have a chance to practice some of the principles of interviewing, and that's something I really enjoy doing. So hopefully that's given you a short idea of the kind of things I'm interested in, among many other interests I hold. And hopefully that's given you some food for thought and an idea of the type of teaching that you might be exposed to when you come to Glasgow. So that's everything from me for now. Thank you so much for listening to me. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. There's my email address on the screen there. Thanks again.
Hi, I'm James, and I teach corpus linguistics at postgraduate level at Glasgow. And in this very brief talk, I'm going to introduce what corpus linguistics is, 2, talk a little bit about my own research interests, and 3, talk a little bit about how those two fit together. So corpus linguistics is quite an unusual subdiscipline within linguistics because it's not specifically about language at all. Instead, it's a methodology for studying language. So in short, corpus linguistics is concerned with harnessing computer technologies in order to identify statistically significant patterns in large language data sets. So in this module, we'll be constructing data sets which aim to be representative of particular language varieties. And a language variety could be anything like an entire language, communication in an entire language. It could be the published works of a particular author. It could be language in video games. It could be journalism around a particular topic. And then what we'll do is draw on a range of techniques in order to make claims about tendencies in those data sets, which are then hopefully generalizable to the entire language variety. So we might be interested in how often a particular feature occurs, say a word or a phrase or a metaphor. We might be interested in other distinctive linguistic features in this data set relative to some kind of linguistic norm. We might be interested in what this particular feature means in this data set. Or we might be interested in what other features tend to occur within the vicinity of the feature that we're looking at. So the module ultimately will be training you to build these representative data sets, also known as corpora. Corpus is Latin for body, and what we're dealing with is bodies of text. And also, the module is concerned with equipping you with the techniques to identify patterns in those data sets. So we'll be drawing on some statistics. The method is primarily quantitative. However, no prior understanding of quantitative methods or statistics is assumed. We'll be starting from the basics and then working upwards. So the findings of corpus linguistics research are quite exciting because as a methodology, it discourages us from using our intuitions about language and instead invites us to look very closely at how language is actually used. And that allows us to form or test hypotheses based on these large representative corpora. And what we find from the findings of corpus linguistics research is that these findings often challenge or contradict our intuitions about how language actually works. The assumptions or expectations that people have about language are often very different from how people actually use language in the real world. And that makes the corpus linguistics method quite exciting. So my own interests very quickly are in the medical humanities. So I'm particularly interested in how our understanding of health and well-being is shaped by the language that we use. And one of the things that makes corpus linguistics at Glasgow quite unique is that my own research and current research interests are integrated into the teaching. Corpus linguistics as a methodology is a very hands-on course. So our workshops will take the form of little case studies. I'll pose questions to you and you'll be tasked with drawing on what you've been taught in the module to answer those questions. So building corpora and looking at patterns in those corpora. So some of these workshops will focus on, we'll be looking at newspaper data. We'll be looking at newspaper data to identify attitudes and assumptions around particular diagnoses. We'll be looking at online forum data to look at lay perspectives around health and illness and how people can be quite creative in the language they use in order to understand unusual health-related experiences. And we'll also be looking at attitudes around health legislation as well. So while many of the case studies will relate to health, we'll also be looking at other topics such as lexicology, language learning, discourse analysis, and historical linguistics. I hope that's given you a good idea of what corpus linguistics is and what makes corpus linguistics at Glasgow special. If you do have any further questions, I'd be very happy to answer those via email, and you can find my email on the staff page. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special session on research and postgraduate teaching in English language and linguistics. I'm very pleased to be joined by Dr. Angela Gayton, who's going to be answering your questions. And I see we've got one in the chat already from Alyssa. So Angela, I hope you can answer this one. Alyssa asks, is the Speech, Language and Sociolinguistics Master's Programme flexible in focus? I am a social anthropology undergrad interested in the social and cultural meaning-making aspects of linguistic studies.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sia. Sia, can I just check, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Excellent. I'm just worried there's a little bit of a lag in the video, but that's good. If you can hear me okay, that's the most important thing. Thank you very much for that question, Alyssa. I really appreciate it. And in order to answer your question fully, I'm going to take a step back and just say a little bit about the 3 master's programs that we offer, and then I'll come to your question specifically as part of that response. So a lot of people on the call today might already be familiar with the fact that we have our 3 master's programs. So we have the MSc in English Language and Linguistics, we have the MSc in Applied Linguistics, and we have the MSc in Speech, Language and Sociolinguistics, which is the one that the question is about. So let me say a little bit about those 3 programs, and then I'll say a bit more about speech, language and sociolinguistics specifically. So the MSc in English Language and Linguistics is perhaps the most general of the 3 programs that we have, and it's suitable for students who are interested in how the English language is used today, and also how it was used in the past, and what kind of mechanisms of change have taken place over centuries. The MSc Applied Linguistics is a bit more focused on language questions and problems as they relate to society. So, for example, language in education, which is my real passion, my area of expertise, and also language in the workplace. The MSc Speech, Language and Sociolinguistics is the most technical of the 3, and it relates to how we produce and how we process speech. So I say that the MSc SLS is the most technical of the 3. It's also the one that has the more strict requirements in terms of core courses that students are expected to take. So students are required on that program to take 1 course in either phonetics or sociolinguistics, and 1 methodology-specific course in phonetics and sociolinguistics. Now, having said that, there is still, even with that most structured of the three programs, there is still the flexibility within the MSc Speech, Language and Sociolinguistics to take one or two other option courses in areas that you might be interested in. So to give you an example, I have had students on my option courses which relate very specifically to aspects of language education. So they're doing their phonetics, they're doing their sociolinguistics, but they're also, they have a side interest in aspects of language education, and they've been very welcome on my courses. I must say, Alyssa, from what you mentioned about your interests in the question in the chat, I wonder if the MSc Applied Linguistics might actually be the more suitable program for you. And I invite you to have a look at the links to both of those programs, which are available on our University of Glasgow webpage, so that you can compare and contrast the information that's given about both of those to be able to make a decision about which of those might be most suitable.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Angela. I hope that answers your question, Alyssa. And hopefully one of my magical YouTube chat moderators can add some of those links to the chat for you so you can have a look now or later on.
Yeah.
In the meantime, everybody, please keep your questions coming. But for now, I've got a couple of questions for Angela myself. Obviously, we've had yourself, Piotr and James talking about your research there, but that's just scratching the surface of everything that I know I'm aware of going on in English language and linguistics. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the other research areas that the department has?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Sia. So in that short presentation from the three of us, you heard us talk about our own specialisms. So for me, it's aspects of language education, second language acquisition, we could say as well. Piotr was talking about his interest in different aspects of legal language, language in legal contexts and forensic linguistics. And James was talking about his expertise in corpus linguistics. And the reason that we wanted to give you those short presentations today is because these areas of interest really represent what our teaching is all about as well. So these are the areas that we research, they're the areas that we are passionate about, that we like to consider ourselves experts in, I would say as well. And this is what informs our teaching at postgraduate level. So we teach about the things that we know inside out and back to front. It's the things that we're really interested in. And we know from student feedback in previous years that this is something that students really appreciate because of the in-depth discussions, the hands-on activities that we do in our classes, which are led by our own research interests. But as Sia says, this is only a snapshot of what is available in the department. So we also have expertise in aspects of psycholinguistics, bilingualism and multilingualism, semantics, onomastics, which is name studies. So looking at proper nouns, so the names of towns, the names of people as well. It's a really interesting option course. Of course, I've already mentioned phonetics, which is really closely aligned with the MSc Speech, Language and Sociolinguistics, and also a range of different courses which look at those historical aspects of English language and linguistics, which I've already mentioned. So a huge range of areas of expertise across our department, which we're really proud of.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Angela. I have to say on a personal level, I love it whenever I get to chat to someone from English language and linguistics, because as you'll have just heard, there is so much going on. There is so much research. So so much you can do there, and lots of flexibility and lots of ways to engage with your different interests. We've got a lovely question in the chat from Bree. So Bree says, I will be a senior student, 15 years plus since my last master's. How is the pacing and workload for a one-year MSc?
That's such a great question, Bree, and welcome to the conversation today. We are delighted when we have students with all different kinds of backgrounds and different kinds of experiences, and also amounts of experience as well. So for me, working in aspects of second language acquisition, language education, I am delighted when I get students who have maybe been in the workplace for quite a few years, maybe teaching themselves, doing things like English for academic purposes or different aspects of language teaching. And for students like those, they always have such rich contributions to making class based on their professional expertise, which is aligned with what we're talking about. So let me just say that I think this is fantastic that you're considering postgraduate study after having been doing other things for the last 15 years. That's fantastic. So let me give a little bit of a sense in response to your question of what things look like over the course of a one-year master's. So the first thing to say is that we have 3 semesters. That's how the academic year is divided up. Semester 1 runs from September to December. Semester 2 runs from January through to April. And semester 3, we call it semester 3, it's the summer months, run from May to September. So in semester 1 and semester 2, you have 10-week semesters, or 11-week semesters with a break in the middle, but let's say 10 weeks of teaching. And those are where you do your taught courses. So depending on which of the 3 programs you're interested in, your core courses will look a little bit different. So I can give you an example from the MSc Applied Linguistics. We have the core course, which is research training. This is something that all students in our department do. And we also have a core course, which is called Applying Linguistics in Social and Professional Life, which gives you this understanding of the breadth of the field of applied linguistics. So in semester 1, you will do some core course and also choose 2 option courses. It's the same in semester 2. Again, you do a core course and choose 2 option courses. And then May to September is where things look a little bit different. So you don't have taught courses as such, but you are allocated 1 member of staff who is your dissertation supervisor. So you will have individual meetings with them over the summer months from May through to September, and they will guide you through the process of you doing your independent research for your dissertation project. So I hope that helps understand. But Bree, if you have any follow-up questions, I'm very, very happy to give more detail if there's anything more that you would like to know. Maybe, in fact, one further thing that I can add on that is that I mentioned we have these 10-week semesters. So we do a block of 5 weeks, we have a break, and then another block of 5 weeks. So the way that the assessment tends to be divided up at postgraduate level for semesters 1 and 2 is that you will have your midterm, which is due to be handed in just after that midterm break. And then we have our final pieces of work, final assignments, which are handed in once teaching is finished. So I really hope that helps to give you a flavour, Bree, of how things look across the academic year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Angela. And thank you very much for that question, Bree. That was great. We've got a couple more minutes left. So if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat now. Angela, just whilst we're waiting for maybe a couple more questions, I wondered if you could tell me about extracurricular activity in the department, because again, there's so much going on. Is there anything that students can get involved in when they join us?
Yes, of course. I think that's a great question, Sia. So I've just talked about, in response to Bree's question, I've just talked about the, let's say, formal structure of the academic year. So what your teaching looks like, what your assessment looks like, your dissertation as well. And in addition to that, there are so many things going on in the department that you can get involved with. And we really encourage our postgraduate students to do so as much as they can. So it's things like reading groups. So myself and Piotr, who you saw in the short presentation at the beginning, we run a reading group which is very specific to applied linguistics. So what we tend to do is choose something like a podcast or a blog post or a news item that we've seen, which relates to an area of applied linguistics. And we get students together to have a really informal discussion over tea and coffee about what sorts of issues that brings up for us, maybe how it connects with the teaching and learning we're doing at that point in semester. So a really nice way to build connections between staff and students in aspects that we're really passionate about. And there are so many other reading groups across the department. I mentioned that spread of expertise and research interests. There are reading groups which align with many of those that I've just mentioned as well. We have research seminars throughout semesters 1 and 2, where we invite external speakers who are in the field of English language and linguistics to come and talk to staff and students about their cutting edge research. So really exciting and innovative things that are going on in the field more broadly. We get the opportunity to hear about what's happening at universities across the UK, even further afield as well. And that's something that our postgraduate students really enjoy getting to hear about, because again, it's a nice complement to the teaching and learning that they're doing. We also have LingSoc, so that's the Linguistics Society, and LingSoc is run by students for students in our subject area, and they have lots of different points of engagement across the academic year. So lots of social things that go on, games nights, which are focused on different sorts of creative language play and quizzes to do with language, all this sorts of thing. So again, I hope that gives you a flavour of what's available in the department beyond the formal and structured teaching and learning that you do.
Great, thank you very much, Angela. We're coming to the end of the session. I think we've got time for one more question.
Yeah,
maybe two if we're lucky. So we've got one here. Do you have to have previous work experience in the field to apply to the MSc in English Language and Linguistics? That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what I would say, I know I mentioned a little bit about the fact that some of our students do have, for example, language teaching experience, and that's something that's very welcome. Many of our students don't at all. Many of our students, in fact, come to us with limited or no work experience at all, because a lot of our students might come straight from their undergraduate degree into their masters. So what I think is wonderful about the cohorts that we teach in our department at postgraduate level is that we have all of this diversity. We've got students coming straight from their undergraduate into their masters who are looking to learn and who have their eyes wide open about what sort of opportunities are available to them. We also have students who have been working maybe for 20 years, working in the UK, working abroad in different sorts of professions as well. And as I say, that's wonderful when they're able to draw on their professional experience as part of what's going on in the classroom. So we welcome people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it really doesn't matter if you don't have work experience at all or work experience in relevant fields. Everyone is welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Angela. And I'm hoping we've got time to squish in this final question from Alyssa. Yes. What kind of differences can I expect in the standards and expectations of teaching and assessment between undergrad and postgrad? That's a great question. Thank you for that, Alyssa.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is something that probably a lot of incoming students to postgraduate study know about. So I'm really pleased that you've highlighted that, Sia. So I would say the biggest step up from undergraduate into postgraduate is the emphasis that is placed on critical thinking. I think this is really, really fundamental. So what we encourage and scaffold and support our students to do from week one in semester one is to be questioning and to be challenging the information that they receive. So postgraduate study is not just about passive, receptive understanding of knowledge. It's not just members of staff transmitting knowledge to students, but it's about a collaborative negotiation of shared understanding through students asking questions and saying, well, okay, I've read this piece of research, I've read this empirical study, but I'm not convinced by these findings. I don't believe that these findings would be valid in a completely different teaching and learning context. Let's say, just to give an example from language education, I think for teaching and learning contexts that I know well, these findings would look really, really different. And I think it's maybe important that we would carry out this study in X context to make a comparison. These are the sorts of things that we might talk about in class. So what is really key is to not just swallow down, not just accept information, but challenge it, question it, identify its strengths and limitations. And that connects to the other part of your question, Alyssa, because that's what we look for in our assessed work as well. When I give really high grades to students, it's because they have demonstrated throughout their written work that capacity for questioning and that capacity for critical thinking. So I hope, I mean, there's obviously so much more to it than that, but I think that's the one thing I would really like to highlight. And also that we help students to get to grips with that level of learning. We don't expect students just to know how to do it automatically. It's a challenging thing. And in the way that we teach, particularly in semester one, when we know students are just finding their feet, we make sure that we help students to understand what critical thinking is and how to apply it in their postgraduate studies.
Thank you very much, Angela. So we've come to the end of the session. Thank you all so much for your brilliant questions. If you have any more that you wish to ask, have no fear, because Angela is going to be joining us again on Wednesday, the 21st of May. alongside some of the other English Language and Linguistics program conveners and some alumni. So start preparing your questions now and think about things that you'd like to ask them. They will be here to talk all things about the postgraduate programs. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah,
so thank you very much.
I'll be delighted to answer more questions on in that meeting in later in May, in the 21st. The questions we had today were fantastic, and I see that Alicia put in the chat that was helpful information. That's brilliant. Please feel free to contact me if there's anything that you want to follow up with. I know that I don't know, Sia, is it possible just to put my email address in the chat?
Yes, of course. If one of my wonderful YouTube moderators, please do that now. That'd be fantastic. Thank you. So it will definitely be there.
Yep, so much good, so many useful points have come up. So if you do have anything that you want to follow up on, please just get in touch by email.
Fantastic. Oh, well, thank you all very much. There's your email address. Thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you later in the month. Bye.
See you later. Bye.